All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode, a version of Live with the League. And today we are in lovely Bay City, Michigan. I'm Dan Gilmartin. I'm the executive director and the CEO of the league. And I've got a whole bunch of folks here today who we're going to be speaking with, most notably the city manager here in Bay City, Ms. Dana Muscott. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for coming.
We're sitting here in what I shouldn't say this out loud with all these local officials on the line, but which is, for my money, probably the prettiest city hall in the entire state. What's it like to work here every day?
Honestly, I always tell people it's just like a new day every day you walk in here, and it is a blessing to walk in this building because it is absolutely beautiful. I
It
mean, it still looks like the 1800s,
it
right?
absolutely does, and it's unbelievable. It's the work that went into restoring this has been fantastic, and it's one of Michigan's really important and really historic communities. One of the original league members, which is why we're here today, and so many great things happening here. I want to talk with you a little bit about some of those things happening here in Bay City. You can't come here now and having been here maybe 10 or 20 years ago and not notice the enormous progress on the waterfront and all the things that you guys are doing. Talk a little bit about that and what the city's role has been in this wonderful turnaround.
Yeah, so the riverfront, we use every inch of that riverfront, to our betterment. There's a particular development that everybody notices when they come to Bay City, and that's the Shaheen development. The Shaheen development was a 60-acre brownfield site. It was in total disrepair, looked terrible when you came over to the river.
Yep.
And years ago, it was probably about 25 years ago, developers came into town, the Shaheens, and they put in a proposal to develop that site. And if you go over it now, it's total transformation, right? So you have $180 million of private investment that took place
Wow.
into that. And through the years, they've been adding on and adding on, but it's literally, in my opinion, it's just a community within a community. You can live there, you can work there. There's medical facilities there, restaurants, bars, and then you have the riverfront. You can walk up and down the riverfront too. But we have 210 residential units right there on site, and there's more planned to come. We have a 100-bed hotel that's there. So when people do come to town and they're, going to a session or whatever here in town, they can stay right there in Uptown. So we're pretty excited about that. And it goes into, it's a tax base for us too. So it was sitting there, not being utilized, looking horrible. And the Shaheen family came in and just made the largest development in the city, and it looks amazing.
Yeah. And you guys do a lot about programming it as well. I mean, you have concerts down there. There's people walking and talking. Even in the wintertime, we were just down there before the meeting down on the waterfront. There's a lot of energy, even on a 30-degree day in February.
Yeah, we do a lot of programming between that and our downtown area. In Uptown, we have concerts out there in the summer by the fountain, so people can gather around the fountain. And there might be some music acts that are along the sidewalks there in Shaheen development in Uptown. And then our downtown area, since we closed the streets because of COVID, there were some things that we realized that people like that placemaking aspect of it, that we close the streets, they can walk up and down our streets in the middle of them because they're closed, it's safe. Restaurants brought out their decks, had them in the middle of the street, so they could serve people. And then we did have those musical acts on every corner. We had yoga going on like on a Saturday morning, and we have yoga in Uptown on the rooftop of one of the facilities too on a Saturday morning. So a super cool concept that we just never did before. And it just really enhances the downtown. It increases the traffic. People love to walk, right? So they're going to concerts in our park and then going to the restaurants and to the bars prior and after, or staying in our hotel downtown. That's right there on the riverfront. And you can go out all night and enjoy yourself in Bay City.
Yeah. And are you really, all this new stuff, but everything that's being done is being done with a sort of an eye to the past as well. I mean, you guys have this rich industrial heritage and this lumber heritage and the importance of this riverfront community for so many years from that perspective as a working riverfront. And now as you sort of transition, still a working riverfront, but as you transition to to other aspects of it, I think you're doing an unbelievable job, as you said, of sort of understanding you've got this amazing architecture around town, you've got this history, you're celebrating that at the same time where you're making it relevant, which
Right.
is really kind of the concept of place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the buildings downtown, it's just like just like City Hall here. They're still historic. They're beautiful. People are taking care of them. They're putting new facades on their buildings, taking down like the old aluminum that somebody covered it up right in the 70s. And so
Mhm.
it's all coming back down because we have a great facade program for, to help those businesses downtown do that. So we're really happy when developers come in and they keep that old cultural aspect to their developments.
Yeah, I'm a fan to a lot of 1970s culture,
Yeah.
but all that aluminum
Really?
garbage that we put all over historic buildings, what were people thinking?
Right.
Um,
Right.
Also here, I mean, talk about celebrating heritage. You guys celebrate both an important Irish heritage with your St. Patrick's Parade and everything that goes
Yeah,
along with
yeah.
that, as well as a Polish heritage,
We
especially on the south end of town.
yeah.
Um, Tell me about that a little bit and what you guys do as a municipal body to make sure that all that sort of is
Sure.
celebrated and moved along.
So what I learned, I've been in Bay City for 25 years, and when I came here, I learned that Bay City likes to celebrate hard. They I want to use that word.
Yeah.
They
That's
go,
part of the heritage.
yes.
There used to be more bars per square foot than
That's
any
right.
city in Michigan, I
Yeah.
recall. I don't know if you still win that or
Yeah,
not.
we're pretty close. They know how to celebrate. Let me just say that. St. Patrick's Day is coming up here. We always do the Sunday prior to St. Patrick's Day. We have a large parade down the
Hmm.
historic Center Avenue, right? So Center Avenue is also known for the historic homes from the lumber days. And so we typically have about 1,000 entries into our parade. It takes hours and hours to get down Center Avenue, and it always ends in downtown. Prior to that, obviously we have the queens that we have to pick out. We have princesses that will lead our city for St. Patrick's Day. So there's a big celebration for that. And then we go into our run. So our run and our walk is a pretty big deal here in Bay City. We usually have about 2,900 entries running down Center Avenue and throughout our city. And a couple years ago, they added the Irish Double, which is a
Ah.
kind of a big thing. About 1,000 people have signed up for this Irish Double. They have to do an 8K and a 5K. So they're doubling up. And I was surprised at how many people are doing it, but they're doing it. What I love most about the run and the walk is everybody comes in their Irish gear. They look amazing and they just don't dress up themselves. They dress up their pets and they dress up their kids. So they're, into the festival. And then
Do they know that the Irish double is more running instead of just a gimmick at the local
yeah,
bar to
right,
get
right.
them in? Or?
Well, yeah, because that's the goal, right?
Right.
After they're done running, they usually end up in a tent or one of the Irish bars here in town to celebrate continually through the day. I swear they should make Monday like a holiday in Bay City because everybody has to go back to work, and I just don't know how they can all do that. But then you brought up the Polish aspect. And so we have the South End, lovingly known as the South End here in Bay City. That's how people say it here. Big Polish population in that area. And they celebrate with their St. Stan's Polish Festival. So they have a Polish festival and a race kicks off that festival as
Uh-huh.
well. So we always have to have the races. I think people need to exercise right before they indulge for the weekend. And they're known for their big beer tent and their food tent, which obviously has authentic Polish food. And then dancing. If you have never been to the Polish festival, you need to come just to see
Polka?
oh yes, the
Yes.
Polish dancing is very happening that weekend. Everybody likes to enjoy it. And they have a festival as well. So they have rides for kids. But we do have a large
Sure.
Polish.
Yeah. I mean, you can just tell that there's such a community aspect
Mhm.
to everything that's being done here. As I said, both celebrating who you are historically as well as sort of moving forward as a community and being really relevant in 2025.
Yeah, and if I can add, we can't forget that Fat Tuesday is coming up
Ah,
here in Bay City, and we have um, Barney's Bakery is really big, along with all the other bakeries here in town. But we have the Polish punchki, right? That everybody has to have for Fat
that's
Tuesday.
not a race too, right?
It's not a race, so no, maybe a race to get there to get them.
Yeah.
But we have a Polish restaurant that's in our south end too called Kryziak's, and they wake up that morning at like 6 a.m. They start Polish dancing on that day to kick off obviously, Fat Tuesday. That's really a fun thing to go to too. Just once. You just
Yeah.
need to go and try it once. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll get Johnny over here.
Yeah.
A couple things that we've been working on you at the league, we've been working with the city on. First off, the housing readiness pilot. I know that's something you guys, like everyone in the state, every community I go to talks about the importance of housing and the
Yeah.
need for more housing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that project and what it's doing and what you're doing here
Yeah.
to address some of those concerns and challenges.
So yeah, obviously we do have a shortage of housing. We call it the workforce housing or the missing middle housing is kind of the terms that we've been using. And the region actually had a meeting set up between Bay, Saginaw, and Midland, and it was led by the Alliance, so the Great Lakes Bay Regional Alliance Group, bringing people together to get like a bigger picture, to address things like housing, childcare, and transportation, but really focus on that housing piece. That was the number one. We need to focus on affordable places for employees to live, right? Like we can get people to come here to our region. And if we want to employ them in our region, we just don't have places for them to live that's
Right.
affordable. And I think that's really, really important. We've been working with MML, MISHTA, HUD, like all of these organizations coming together to talk to developers. And I feel like the biggest piece was learning from the other communities, what's working for Midland and can we transform that
Right.
into Bay City and vice versa into Saginaw. We have two big developments that we're working on right now in Bay City. The Housing Commission is doing a $21 million housing project right now. It's in its phase, and we're adding about 56 units, which is big for Bay City. And then we're also getting Water Street lofts by the Riverfront Apartments, and that's a $27 million project, and that's going to be 96 affordable units.
Wow.
And it's starting kind of a block off of the riverfront and then going all the way up to Washington Avenue. So it's going to be in the downtown
Right in
area.
the heart of everything.
Right in the heart of
Yep.
everything. So if you're working downtown, you're working in a restaurant or a shop downtown, you're going to be able to walk to work, right? So we're really focused on that. Community development is engaged with working on that housing piece, which I think everybody in the state is working on.
Yes. They
but
are.
They
And
are.
it's great to see some of these projects coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And I think, as you know, they can be difficult to do. They take years and sometimes to plan, and there's different
Yes.
agencies involved in the state, sometimes even the federal government, philanthropy, private business, banks, you name
Yeah.
it. But we're starting to see some real traction in some areas. I'm glad to see you guys are doing such great work there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another big cost item that's been an issue here in Michigan is lead service line replacement, where the league and the League Foundation actually has been working directly with the city to identify potential capital stacks for dealing with those lead
Right.
service line replacements, which are huge,
Yeah.
as you know. Tell us just a little bit about that
Yeah.
and what you're getting out of that.
So MML contacted us back in the fall about doing a pilot program with them, which I'm really appreciative because, when someone contacts you about doing a pilot, you're like, oh, well, should I or shouldn't I? But I'm going to tell you, it's been the best exercise that we as a city have gone through, just because it's opened our eyes on how to do things a little bit differently and to bring partners to the table that we never thought of bringing to the table. So MML and the MML Foundation has been really gracious in working us through this process. I believe they're working with Dearborn too.
Yep.
So I think
City Dearborn and Bay City.
in Bay City. Yep. So we've had the two of us, we've worked separately, but I think the ideas have carried over to both of our,
No question. Yep.
to our communities. So just to give you, I'm sure everybody is through this process too, but obviously to replace these lead lines, it's an unfunded mandate that we're having to deal with. Where quite frankly, cities in townships typically don't have the lead lines. It's mostly cities. We don't have the money to replace those.
Right.
We have a little over 16,000 lead lines in the city of Bay City that need to be replaced. We used to say that they were about 3,000 a piece. To replace them, to the house, it's upwards of 5,000 now. So funding is very hard to come by. We searched for every loan we can. We searched for every grant we can. We did use some ARPA funds to help us get started there. We've replaced about 12,000 so far, but we still have about 4,000 to go. Bringing it back to, MML helping us, the goal is to work with the MML team, which, like I said, has really opened our eyes, and to reduce our cost and to bring people to the table.
Right, bring other not
Yeah.
usual suspects.
Right,
Well,
and
yeah,
and that's exactly what we did about a week or 2 ago. We had people that were from around our county, people that I never thought that we would have asked. I mean, you're talking
right.
bankers are coming. We actually invited the county. I was very happy to see Bay County came to the meeting. But just different groups, some nonprofit groups even coming. And then the foundation was there as well, so that was really nice. So they really did open our eyes to people being involved in medical groups too. I was just thinking there was one other group that was at the table, and I love that aspect. I never thought about bringing like people from the hospital or from our medical centers here because of the issue with lead lines and the seriousness of, that happening. So
Yeah, we're finding some unique partners in both communities
yeah,
and some opportunities for assistance with funding and assistance with loans and grants and you name it. So
yeah,
obviously it's a huge issue, whether it's public health, whether it's price of real estate. I mean, there's a million different aspects of why
yeah,
this stuff is important. And getting everybody who has a play in that to the table is something that I
right.
think is going to prove to be great. And what we're hoping to find out from our work in Dearborn and Bay City is the ideas and what we learn we can bring to every community throughout the state that has this issue.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it's an issue in cities and villages, large and small, all across the state of Michigan.
Right. And I think the big thing that we took away from, at least what I took away a couple weeks ago, was the renter's ordinance idea. Like, we have never thought about doing a renter's ordinance where, because we don't get access to these homes sometimes that we can go in and replace them. And so we're looking at that to give
Great.
us jurisdiction with, the landlords or lack of landlords, so we can get in to these establishments to make sure that those lead lines are replaced.
Fantastic. And one more item I just want to cover before we jump into our legislative portion of the agenda is your work with 1650. I know as a woman city manager in the state, it's something very close to your heart, and I know you've been a huge advocate and supporter of that program, which for people that maybe don't know about it, is a program where we prepare females to basically be candidates for the top administrative jobs in communities because for whatever reason, there are probably a million of them, they weren't really getting those opportunities in the past and they're getting more and more now. Tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, so years and years ago when you started it, Emily had approached me about being involved. And I think at the time I might have been maybe a deputy city manager, going into the city manager role. But this program is solid. I mean, Emily and Summer and everybody who have contributed to MML have really brought the attention that women are just not being escalated up to the top job in all the organizations. And it may even be just department head, right? Like, it just doesn't have to be the city manager or the township manager. It could just be a department head. Where people or women are afraid, to maybe apply because it's always been held by a man, or even addressing the gender, addressing the gender and also the wages too, right? And what you can be paid. But I really found it good for myself, even though I was interviewing women to prepare them as part of the process, like doing mock interviews, presenting, and just being an all-out supporter. Like, every time we go somewhere, we talk about it, and I talk about it here at the city all the time too, because my department heads are mainly men, and so I try to encourage some people, like even people that are just coming in on, the entry level jobs. Like, I want you to still work your way up, right? It's important to go through these programs. And so it's good to send your staff to this program. Um, but I learned, even myself, like going through these mock interviews, some of these women that were interviewing in the mock interviews, I want to hire them. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. Like, I've gotten off a few and I'm like, hey, these women, they've got it. So they're being trained correctly and brought up through your classes and just preparing them for the
Yeah,
world.
and it's a great program. Both there's a gender equity component
Yes.
to it, but it also is opening up the city management profession and the local government management profession in general to people that for whatever reason weren't engaged in it before.
Okay.
And so we want to make sure we have all the great people in Michigan actually getting into being an economic development director, a DDA
Yep.
director, a city engineer, a city manager. Those types of things are so important. So the more the merrier in terms of getting more people prepared for that.
And
It's
to have
been
that support
fantastic.
system too,
Yeah.
right? So there's other women that have gone through it, and you have testimony from women that have, gone
Oh,
through these
yeah.
processes, and all of a sudden now they're a city manager or a
Well,
township manager, and that's amazing.
yeah, and the 16, obviously 16%. And when we started this,
Yes.
were female. Today it's approaching 24%. So
Yes.
we know we're making
That's
a
success.
dent,
Yes.
and we've got
Yeah.
more, like I said, more people coming before councils asking for jobs who are qualified and ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's something we feel really strongly about.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
thank you for all your work on that. It's been great to have tenured managers like yourself being so engaged and so a part of that. And we hope you continue to do that.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so you can continue with us on this and
Okay.
pop in your 2 cents anywhere you want to, but I'm now going to kind of pop over to John Lamacchia and Dave Hodgkins here to talk about some of the legislative activities going on. We're in a new session, obviously, in Lansing. There's all kinds of crazy stuff happening in Lansing and DC. You're seeing a lot of it on TV, but then there's more stuff happening behind the scenes, and we're really starting to get to the point where we're moving quickly now, as opposed to sort of still in that holiday haze of the early parts of January and whatnot. So I think I'll start with Dave, who's going to talk about the Earned Sick Time Act, which is a big issue, and we'll go from there. So Dave Hodgkins.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so the Earned Sick Time Act is something that Speaker Matt Hall announced as a massive priority at the end of last session, and certainly kicked things off with an introduction of a bill this session as well. And I will say that they did pass that legislation this past Friday. It was House Bill 4002, signed by the governor, which is now Public Act 2 of 2025. And that makes some pretty substantial changes to the citizen-initiated petition that's called the Earned Sick Time Act. So as passed by the citizens back in 2018, that was actually amended by the legislature at that time in a manner that the Supreme Court actually found unconstitutional. And they implemented the original ballot language to take effect on February 21st, unless the current legislature passed the bill that they did. And so some of the significant changes that were made, I'll run through some of the more notable ones, is a distinction between what is considered a small employer and a large employer. So for small employers, that's anyone with employees of 1 to 10 employees, and they must be allowed to accrue 40 hours of earned sick time. And it's also important to note that the provisions passed in the legislation for them do not go into effect until October 1st of this year. For large employees, that's anyone with 11 employees and above, they must be allowed to accrue 72 hours of earned sick time. And that's actually in effect immediately. It went into effect the morning of February 21st. There are a few exemptions in terms of employees. So youth employees are exempt from this. Seasonal employees, there are some exemptions for them in that they are not allowed to use their earned sick time hours until 120 days of employment. So that might take them through the season anyways. And then there's also some language in there to address variable employees. Now, a variable employee is someone that is allowed to set their own hours, and there's no requirement for them to meet in terms of minimum hours worked. I also think it's very important to point out that there are different notification classifications in this now. So an employee is expected to, for foreseeable circumstances, inform the employer of an absence within 7 days prior to them actually taking leave. For unforeseeable circumstances, it gives the employer a little bit more flexibility to work with the employee. They're allowed to work within an existing policy that they see fit. They still can't deny an employee from taking leave, but they can, in their policy, require certain documentation to follow up. I also think it's very important that the bill now allows for front loading. So that's something that many of our members reached out for, concerned about the ability to accrue and track all of the hours. If an employer decides that they want to front load those 72 hours or 40 for a small employer, then a lot of that is completely mitigated. There's no requirement for that tracking and accrual going forward, only the expenditure on a year-by-year basis. And so then just the last thing that I'll mention too, because this is also something that I think for municipalities, for employers, there was a lot of risk. There was a presumption clause in there that was completely removed. So the private right of action has been removed and that rebuttable presumption has also been removed. So again, just offering a little bit more protection for an employer. We've been suggesting to all of our members that they work with their municipal attorneys to make sure that they have policies that meet the essence of Earned Sick Time Act. So again, if you're a small employer, you have a little bit of time, but if you are that larger employer, you have 11 employees or more, this is in effect as we speak. So the language does give you a little bit of grace in terms of having to issue your policy to your employees, a written policy within 30 days of the act taking effect, which was February 21st. But within that 30 days, you need to provide that written notice of what your policies are and all of the rights of your employees as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, Dave, can I ask, I know there's some questions about how the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity may look at enforcement around this. So what are we hearing about what they may do here in the short term, as this is just brand new?
I think there's going to be a little bit of latitude in terms of enforcement, right? I think they know that employers are going to need a few days at least to kind of craft their policies. I will also say the governor signed the bill in the early hours of the morning of February 21st. So technically that original language for the petition took effect at midnight and there was that gap period. And we're told that that gap period is not going to be something that they look at to enforce. Like there's no accrual required for those few hours of time.
Yeah, and I think because of the timing on this, there's probably a lot more for us to learn from the department as well. And we anticipate they're going to be coming out with some more guidance as we move forward, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think one of the most interesting pieces of this is not actually the legislation itself. It's the fact that they came to an agreement. And so, as we think about what happens next with the state budget, one of the most positive developments that we may have found for the state budget is the fact that they did compromise and negotiate a reasonable solution here on both the Earned Sick Time Act and minimum wage, which we didn't talk about directly here because it's a little bit less of an impact to our members. But as we move forward in the next couple of weeks, they have shown that they can work behind closed doors, have a civil conversation and find reasonable solutions. And I think all of that bodes very well for a final outcome on the state budget. Now, that being said, I think it's highly likely we are going to see major differences between what the governor has proposed, what the Senate is currently working on, and we will see committee hearings begin here shortly. And then same with the House, what they're working on and what we're likely to see committee hearings on here in the next couple of weeks. And it's those points of differences that will likely be stark, but I think there's going to be hope now based on what they were able to do here that compromise can be found. Now, the biggest thing I'm sure we're keeping an eye on beyond the typical components of things like revenue sharing is going to be roads. And whether or not these vast differences between what the governor has recently proposed and what the speaker has put out can be, really bridged, where the speaker's really talking about using just existing revenue, and the governor is proposing new revenue in her transportation funding proposal. And the couple of things I will mention here, because I do want to be positive about what we see, and I mean that sincerely, is that for the first time ever, they're not negotiating over a number. They're both at right about $3 billion. And while maybe a little short of what the reports say we need, no argument. And then the other is both of those proposals decide to look at how we charge sales tax at the pump. They have different solutions on them, but from a policy mechanism, they both want to address that. And then deep in the weeds of this is they both talk about sending more money to local units of government or local road agencies. And if you couple those things together based on what we just saw here in the last week, I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about their ability to continue to negotiate and solve major problems, which we know from our experience at the local level and what we're seeing need to be addressed and need to be solved in a very real fashion. I'm going to move on, Dave, because I want you to sort of talk about, we have State of the State coming up this week. So what are we anticipating? What do we expect maybe to hear from the governor on that front?
Yeah, I think the governor is going to, again, continue talking about road plans and looking forward to that. It's also interesting because she has been very vocal this past week about wanting to, in some way, partner with the president, right? Not wanting to be confrontational. So I think that you're going to hear a pretty strong forward message, but something that opens the door to that communication in terms of all of the executive orders that we're seeing coming down and things like that. So I think it's going to be a lot of the stuff that we've heard in the past, right? So fix the damn roads is her campaign slogan. She's not going to let up on that. She's been very strong. I also think that there is room to work with Speaker Hall on some of his initiatives going forward, keeping in mind that there is a Democrat Senate still that she has to strike that compromise with.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you had mentioned working with the president. I think it's a good transition to talk quickly about a federal issue. Just the other day, we posted a blog on the tax exempt status of municipal bonds and how that may be in jeopardy as we move forward. Dan, when we look at the federal issues that are out there, they always talk about pay fors, right? And so when they look at potentially either decreasing the size of the federal budget, or if they look at potentially paying for additional tax cuts or continuation of tax cuts, what we've heard is that the tax exempt status on municipal bonds may be in jeopardy. We're working very closely with the National League of Cities. We're going to be out in DC in a couple of weeks. But I know two of the things really that NLC has talked about is, one, make sure you weigh in. So the blog will tell you how to do that and sort of inform them of where municipal bonds are impactful. But two, the ability for communities like here in Bay City to adopt potential resolutions of support and pass that on to members of Congress. So Dan, you have been on several calls with
Yeah.
National League of Cities. What are you hearing?
No, I think that's very important because so much is happening in the public realm in DC right now. That something like the tax exemption on municipal bonds is way down the list. And you have so many new members of Congress. You have even the Senate, where you don't have as many new members, but they want to hear from people. If they're not hearing from someone, they're considering that maybe it's not a big issue. And we're concerned again, the tax exempt bonds, because in some line somewhere, it looks like a big number, and they don't think about necessarily, or even in some cases even know what's on the back end of that, which is literally billions of dollars in investment at the local level. We want to make sure they understand that's a big issue. So we've got that information on the blog that you put out last week. The information is there. It's a quick resolution. It's a note. It's a phone call. It's an email. Let your Congress members, as well as the two United States senators here, know how important that is, not just to the city budget, but to the entire community. I mean, a lot of the stuff you're doing here is you're driving private investment off of your own public investment. That's those are the stories they need to hear, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. It sort of gets buried, right? This isn't a partisan
Exactly.
issue.
It's not going to be the first one you hear about on the
No.
news.
But
It's gonna be somewhere deep.
understanding and getting those
Right.
members of Congress to really see where it's making the impact, those specific stories, that are, hey, on this project, we utilize it. If we don't have that, we couldn't do it. Type thing.
Absolutely.
And
And as
that-
you said, we'll
that
be
really
out there
matters.
week after next. We're going out with our president, our vice president, and a number of staff members and members from the Mayor's Association, the city managers group and the attorneys group, and we're going to be knocking on doors. So we'll know if they've heard from you. Hopefully it's not the first time they're hearing about some of these issues, because we're going to scream loudly about it. And if we're screaming, if they've got 20 or 30 resolutions or phone calls in their bin somewhere, it'll be a lot easier to get that point through.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, that's right. And I think it will, without a doubt, maybe be one of our most interesting trips out there.
It will be.
In the last several years is it's not just those issues, but it's several others that may be impacting our communities. And I think anything our members can share with us about the impacts that they're seeing and we can pass it along on your behalf too would be helpful.
Okay. Now looking to see, do we have any, no, we don't have any questions coming in. So I guess with that, I will thank Dana again for having us in this lovely community. If you get a chance to come to Bay City and see this unbelievable city hall, you will be welcomed with open arms as a fellow municipal administrative or elected official out there. And when you can, you get a free cup of coffee, right?
Absolutely.
And maybe find a Polish parade or an Irish bar or all kinds of different things happening here. But I do recommend it. Great community here, one of the real jewels here in Michigan, with all the history it has and all the amazingness it has around the waterfront and the neighborhoods and whatnot. I wish you continued success in everything you're doing here.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thanks for being with us, and everybody listening, thanks for listening again. I'll close out with a couple of different things. I will say, first off, our Capitol Conference is coming up on the 18th and 19th of next month of March, and you can sign up for that still at mml.org. You'll get the latest, not only from DC, as John and I will just be back from there, but we'll have some more updates in terms of what's going on in the state budget and a whole bunch of different things there. So our next episode of Live with the League will be on March 10th. And we'll be back in the office at that point in time. So we look forward to that. So thank you for tuning in today. Thanks for having us staying in Bay City, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.